still have to be in the right place at the right time to a degree.
What crazy ideas. Welcome to this special summer episode of Endoscopy Essentials. You might have noticed we are already in the second season, so a huge thank you to all our viewers and also our sponsors Olympus and AbbVie, who have schlepped us through the initial period. And we are planning a lot of new features, and one of them is new faces as interviewers. And a very warm welcome to Manmeet Matharoo from London.
Thanks, Thomas.
She will help me, and of course what we like to do is to have a bio at the beginning. So who is Manmeet Matharoo? And I asked her and she said, wait a bit, what about you? So we decided, two different generations, maybe not many similarities. We ask each other about our career and other things we might be interested in. So with an Italian coffee, cheers.
Cheers. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. And I guess it's important to start with the fact that we're in the beautiful city of Milano doing the Endoscopy On Air, which is about to go live. And actually our paths wouldn't have crossed if it wasn't for Endoscopy On Air. And I think that in itself is a generational break, because I think yourself and Ale had this insight into actually how do you progress this brilliant idea that you had to make it really even more global, more diverse. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that you asked me to be involved in that. So I guess my question to you is, how did Endoscopy On Air start? Why do you think that was an important part for you to pursue, given that you had such an illustrious career before this?
Well, honestly, for very banal reasons. So Ale and I had maybe a similar idea at similar times. So Ale had a physical meeting, which was very successful, called Image. And after 10 of those meetings, he decided, I want to have something new. And I was looking at the budgets of those physical meetings we have been doing and thought, will this go on forever? So let's think about something new. And we started here in Milano in 2019, talking to the industry, who probably thought, what crazy idea is that? And then COVID came, and and pretty soon we thought, okay, two old guys, so we need fresh blood. And I was calling George Webster and saying, whom would you recommend? And this is how we ended up with you at Endoscopy On Air, and now at Essentials as well.
That's fascinating, because it is truly a global endoscopy conference. I don't think there's anything quite like it. And I have to say, when I first saw Endoscopy On Air, I was quite struck by the breadth, array, talent of endoscopists that you had from across the globe, people who I hadn't met before. And it was a real eye-opener. So I think just seeing that on screen is a very powerful thing. And I guess there's something in there about providing that access of education online to anyone of any means across the globe. So that must be an important aspect of what you do.
Yeah, we're constantly thinking about education. I mean, there are so many questions. That's a podcast of its own. I think how to educate, but also whom to educate, for what purposes in time of great economical constraints. So we thought maybe online for everybody is something democratic, of course supported by industry again, but and we are playing around with formats. That's what we like to do.
Very diverse and very green to be able to access all of this fantastic endoscopy across the globe.
Well, in my generation, green was not the first idea to do that, but then we discovered, it could be quite green as well.
And it's the way I guess things are moving. It's an important consideration for us. But I wanted to just ask you a question going right back. So how and when did you know that you were interested in endoscopy? How did that passion of yours start? Do you recall the moment? Was there a light bulb moment?
I mean, there are always coincidences, which in retrospect you might declare as a plan. But I was a young doctor, so we had at the end of the studies, we had to do a kind of a practical period of a year. So I was in surgery, internal medicine, and I extended this period to 2 years actually, because I wanted to go abroad to Vienna, Zurich, and London. And then I was in Munich for, I think, a period in urology. And my aspiration was cardiology, because I'd done a lot of electives. And then a guy said in urology, there's a new gastroenterologist coming and there are always new jobs open, so why don't you try there? And then I ended up in gastroenterology.
That's how it happened. So given that, I guess, I did a quick search, as you told me to yesterday, on our very clever friend ChatGPT, and it talks about how illustrious your career is, and it really is quite phenomenal what you've achieved over your long career. And I wonder, what do you think is the importance of the academic output that you've had alongside a very practical skill? So ChatGPT tells me that you have over 750 publications, 22,000 citations. This is huge. You've had senior roles with journals as an editor, and developing this academic persona alongside a very practical career. What do you think are the benefits or value or importance of that?
Well, again, it developed in some ways. So when I started studying medicine, I thought I will never go to a university hospital. Mm-hmm. I want to have, I want to broadly help mankind and be a family doctor or whatsoever. You have these vague ideas. But then I ended up at a university hospital, and I liked it. And I liked the combination of practical work, like in endoscopy, and thinking about it. Which I think a university hospital is the only place where you can afford that. Because you have the infrastructure, you have colleagues challenging you, and so I sort of staggered into that.
And I guess you've seen a lot of papers pass through your desk. So given your experience, what would be the top 3 pieces of advice you'd give an aspiring author to submit an article? Given all of the good and bad papers I guess you've seen over the years, what would be your nuggets of advice if someone were to submit?
I'm frequently asked how to write a good paper. I think you should go one step back, how to do a good study. And that's quite tough without mentoring. Because when I look back, when I started reading papers and publishing, the requirements were so different. If you look at a New England paper from, 92 or 90, the methodology was quite basic. Mm-hmm. Now the requirements, statistics have greatly increased. So you need to be in an infrastructure. And it's one of the things I admire with the Dutch system. Because when people go there, they start as fellows, not with practical training, but they do research and they get introduced. So for me, it was learning by doing. So I became assistant editor of endoscopy, and here I sat with papers. And so I was asking other people and read hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And I think the other way would have been much easier, and this is what I recommend.
So who are your key mentors?
Well, I was in Munich in a department where the boss, Meiner Klassen, was an endoscopist. So there was the big umbrella of endoscopy over us. And actually, I had mentors in different areas. Fritz Hagenmüller, he taught me how to give lectures, because when he saw my first slides, he said, way too much text. And nobody can read that. And I was part of a basic research group for GI hormones for 2 years. And this guy, Volker Schuss-Jara, he then helped me with my endoscopic papers.
I think the value that mentorship can give, young aspiring endoscopists, whether it's in practical skills, in developing their academic profile, is actually invaluable. And, it's a part that often gets overlooked. It kind of happens by accident. It's not factored into anybody's job plans. But actually, when you look back at key moments in your career, there's often a key mentor or person that's kind of either inspired you or given you an opportunity that's opened up, a big avenue of research, for example.
Yeah, it's coincidence quite often.
Yeah.
So the question back to you, 1 generation later at least, do you think things have changed, or you still have to look around and find your mentor and here he or she is or not? Or
yeah, I think things have changed. I think there are, you still have to be in the right place at the right time to a degree, and there is that sort of coincidence element of, where the stars align and what's meant for you. But I think actually there are some fantastic mentorship programs when you look at sort of ESGE, BSG. Lots of people are now, women in endoscopy, offering these. There's very structured programs. There's, I think, quite a strong evidence base behind mentorship and coaching. And when you look at professional athletes, for example, they wouldn't go into a key game without having a formal mentorship. And I think bringing that science of performance and teamwork into endoscopy is a really exciting field, because it's how you do, everyday endoscopy better, and you improve quality and safety. These things are important to me. So I think we've become a bit more organised about it. It's a bit more fair. I think otherwise it's sometimes a bit disproportionate as to who may have access to a mentor or be in a university hospital, as you say. And I guess the elephant in the room is that, there aren't that many female endoscopists. So quite often, in my early stages of career and even now, I sometimes feel that, I'm not sure I could do this, or, is this for me? And you have all those questions. And I'm not saying that men don't have those questions. I think it's a thing that we all encounter, but actually being able to dissect those with a mentor that knows you and can guide you through steps to give you the independence and confidence to carry things through, has been a key part of my career journey anyway.
So that means for female endoscopists, it's better to have a female mentor? Because we didn't think about, because endoscopy was all men. So.
Yeah, not necessarily. I wouldn't say so. I think it's important that you think about the characteristic traits, what that mentor can bring to you from their practical experience, their academic experience, and sometimes it's personal as well, and it may be about, juggling family or work-life balance, which aren't just female issues, but actually I think you get different things from different mentors. I don't think you just have to have one.
Exactly. So you have to select a few.
You have to be smart about who
Right.
you go to and ask for. But no, I don't think so. And actually some of my key early champions were not women. And, part of the reason I fell into doing gastroenterology, because I was very inspired by, a very impressive male consultant who's a gastroenterologist. So I think it's not just women should be paired with women for mentorship. I think that's short-sighted.
So initially, did you also want to end up somewhere else, orthopedics or
not
cardiology?
Orthopedics. I mean, I fell into medicine by accident. Actually, my interest and my background are more in the arts. So when I was at school, I studied biology, chemistry, French and art. So I kind of had quite a diverse interest. And actually, I'm quite a creative person rather than sort of mathematical or scientific person. So I wasn't really destined to be a doctor, but I fell in love with biology, again inspired by a teacher, and ended up in medical school, and that was my place. But I wasn't a born gastroenterologist. I didn't think I could scope. I didn't think I had the practical skills. And I was very influenced by, a team when I was a medical student, a gastroenterology team that were just very proactive, very engaging. It was very hands-on. I had lots to do, and I felt very energized. And I think being noticed and recognized in that scenario, it makes you fly. And I think that's where I developed an interest. So I think it's the people I met rather than the specialty itself.
And getting into medicine, do you think a family background is important or not?
I mean, I think, I think you have to pursue what you're passionate about. And I think...
But do you know when you're young? I mean...
No, not necessarily,
No.
but I guess it's an exploration. And I know nowadays lots of people do medicine as a degree, as a launch pad into other careers, not necessarily to follow the vocation of becoming a doctor. So there's a thing about doing the degree and doing the vocation thereafter. So I don't think but I think the beauty of medicine is that it's, gives you so many opportunities. Maybe it would have been orthopedic surgery had I had those opportunities in my early career and met the right people, who knows? So I don't think, and I don't think you should pigeonhole yourself and make those decisions early. I think you should be open to seeing where your interests follow.
But when you think back, you leave high school, and how is the decision process? How was it in your case?
So when I left high school, I made 2 applications, one for art school and one for medical school. So it was a real flip of the coin, I have to say, and I was expecting not to get into medical school. And then I had a choice to make. And actually, I think there was something about the science that just got me, and the biology and the fascination with, I think, the human body, I have to say. So that's how I ended up in medical school. And I think thereon, I was very fortunate to have a lot of positive role models, a lot of encouragement. I didn't see, like that I was, not given opportunities, which I know some of my colleagues have felt. And so I've been very fortunate in that sense. Maybe I was in the right place at the right time. But I think you also then have to carve out your own path, and you have to be proactive about making your own luck. I don't think it's a passive thing.
Because we tend to hear what the young generation, that they don't know what to do, but I think there's a lot of coincidence. When I think back, I'm not directly from a medical family background, so my father was a lawyer and my mother was a housewife. She should have studied medicine because she adored medicine. Her dad was a chief of internal medicine in Austria. He died when I was born, so I didn't know him, but there was this medical mythology, and then I followed it and I well, let's try.
Yeah.
And when you start studying, it's like school.
Yes.
It's physics, which I hated anyway, chemistry,
Yeah.
biochemistry, so it's just an extension of school. But then the first exposure is important. So when you see patients for the first time, you have an elective period as an assistant nurse. Then I remember the first contact, and then you realize, can I do it or not?
Yeah.
And if not, it would have been hard. But
Yeah. But it's the human element of it, I think,
Yes.
in medicine, isn't it? You've got all of the rigour of the science, but actually, at the end of the day, you know, each endoscopy, each clinical episode is completely unique, and that's the beauty of what we do, I guess, is that actually it's not protocolized, and it is actually that wonderful element of actually, you know, being in touch with one human story. And I think, you know, that's why, however challenging our careers are, you know, that's why I would go back and do it all again. Would you go back and choose the same career?
yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, the circumstances are different, and thinking, if you think back, it's always difficult to compare.
Yes.
There are a lot of regulations nowadays, and paperwork has increased. So it's maybe not a really balanced question, but you know, I look back with great satisfaction.
Yeah.
So I would probably try to find a way into modern systems when I was young again.
So I was just looking back at, you know, obviously how much you've achieved, and you know, it's, you know, the level of endoscopy you do and the variety of endoscopy that you do is quite remarkable. And do you think that's something that current endoscopists can do, should do? Is it feasible to do all of the procedures given our technological advances?
Well, depending on the country and on the system, I think there are different conflicts in medicine. So 50, 60 years ago, there was just internal medicine.
Yeah.
Then now is gastroenterology, which is huge. Cardiology is one organ, and still divided into people, you know, doing different types of work. And in gastroenterology, depending on the system, there's a conflict whether they should keep it together or whether you should specialize. And of course, if you want to do endoscopy, you have to specialize. And even within endoscopy, if you are a pancreatobiliary guy with US and enteroscopy and ERCP, you probably, if you do that at a high level, you're probably not the guy doing ESD and POEM all the time.
Yes.
So even within that tiny subspecialty, and I think that calls for larger units, for units where you can afford to do that and don't have to do an IBD clinic and a hepatology clinic and then polypectomy. I think I'm really curious how the systems will develop. So in Germany, there is still this attempt to, you know, remain broad, at least initially, and it's actually, I think it's good. But at some stage you have to specialize, and then it depends on career options you have. So if you can develop career options in a subspecialty, may encourage people. If you don't have career options, you might think twice.
Yeah.
So how is it in the UK? You have more of a specialization?
So similar in as much as we're encouraged to be general to start with, particularly early on in the training. And sort of the core curriculum is divided into general gastroenterology, hepatology, nutrition aspects. So, you know, I guess that's important to get an exposure as to which aspect of gastroenterology you might think about subspecializing in. But actually the way the sort of shape of training and things are working is that actually they're trying to contract the training period such that trainees are needing to commit to a stream of specialisation almost early on, so whether it's hepatology or gastroenterology broadly. And then that obviously influences what endoscopy training follows, you know. So there is a tension in that, because I think it is hard, as you said, to know what you want to do so early on, and you have to sort of, I think, grow those skills over time in a way. But then later on, I think, you know, as, you know, consultants, yes, I think subspecialization, but, you know, it also depends upon where you work. So, you know, if you're in a large university hospital setting, you know, yes, you'll have lots of subspecialization because you have a larger body of experts, whereas if you're in, you know, a district general hospital, which may be a bit more of a rural or smaller aspect, you may have to be more broad, because actually, you know, you're the only gastroenterologist and therefore you're going to provide that service. And I don't think that means it's less of a skill. I think they're just different skills. So I think you have to cater to your trust, your hospital, your population. But for me, really, it comes down to that sort of quality aspect, you know, and getting those sort of minimum numbers to make sure that you're actually competent, and not just competent, but excellent at what you do. Because, you know, at the heart, we all want to provide a good service. Nobody comes to work to do a mediocre job. But it does depend upon the opportunities you have for training and mentorship and, you know, all of those things that we talked about. So there's a sort of tension there. But I think, you know, in the UK especially, you know, I think there is a feeling that, you know, you should be competent broadly, and then after that you develop your subspecialty.
One interesting question when you compare generations is hierarchy. You know, when I think back, there was a clear hierarchy, and it very much depended on the boss. I mean, if you train young people under 30, do you think this has changed a lot, or maybe not so much, and we are just, I'm now at a different stage, and looking back it looks different, but it's not so different when I would look forward?
So it's really interesting. I think hierarchy is built into medical and surgical specialties, and we know it has lots of negative connotations. It doesn't help patient safety in many scenarios, and good leadership has to also be part of followership. So if you've just got a very clear, steep hierarchy, then actually you're not listening to people on the ground floor. Maybe you're not even that much of a good leader. And I think sometimes we become very territorial within medicine, so hierarchy as well as, you know, your specialty camps. You know, this is not really a great environment for sort of teamwork, decision making, and all of those non-technical factors that we know feed into patient safety. So I think there's a push towards trying to flatten hierarchies, and there are sort of, you know, ways that people can do that, whether it's sort of, you know, calling people by first names. So for example, if you are in an endoscopy suite and there is a student nurse that, you know, feels that they may be at the bottom of that rung in inverted commas, and you're the, you know, very esteemed expert Professor Roche, but you're about to, you know, do something that they think is not the right thing for the patient, that they would be able to call you by your first name and say, Thomas, please, you know, this drug has expired, or whatever it is. That's really hard to do in practice. But if you instill this, these thoughts, then, you know, yes, possibly we could affect hierarchy, but I think it still exists. And we know it can be harmful if it's not sort of, you know, detrimental to teamwork, you know, if the hierarchy is too steep.
But maybe it's determined by the market. When I was young, there were long lines of people applying for the job. Now it's not quite the other way around, but it's much harder. Maybe it's as simple as that. So you can't afford to be too autocratic as a chief.
How did that make you feel? I mean, when you're in that scenario, your experiences of...
I was in a hierarchic system, but it was not a bad one. So I think you have to consider long term, you want to get something back from your coworkers, right? You know, something intellectually, something on a human basis. So I think it's quite natural that you get in good contact and try to find out what the coworkers want. So at the end, I think it's a question of mentality, but I think you benefit much more if you're not too autocratic, and then you have to control everything, and you know you have to be there all the time, or
And there's also this piece about developing new leaders and upskilling the people that are going to replace you in whatever position, you know, whether that's the chief of your department, or, you know, a research post, or a governance role. Actually, I think, you know, it comes down to that thing about mentoring and upskilling and providing people with the tap on the shoulder. You know, you could do this if you wanted to. Hey, what would stop you? Because ultimately none of us are going to be doing the same thing forever. So actually, for the benefit of patients, I think it's important to think about that almost contingency planning as to, you know, how do I upskill? How do new people bring their ideas? Because actually there's you know, other ways to do this role that might be better than the way I see it. So I think being open to that conversation with your team is important.
That's very true, but when I think back, this never has been a topic 30 years ago. So if it's now in the discussion and if it's now in a team discussion, I think it's a good development, isn't it?
I think so, but I guess on the flip side, it sounds a bit woke. It sounds a bit too, perfect, and is it an unrealistic aspiration? I think there is some balance in between, and I think you do need good, strong, clear leadership. But I think you can do that without sort of the sort of hierarchical kind of stereotypes in the past that maybe weren't so helpful, and maybe people dropped out of endoscopy as a result of that, and we lost a lot of talent along the way. We have a shortage of endoscopists.
Probably, yes, yeah.
And that's a really important consideration for us as individuals, as colleagues, and for our patients, because we've still got to provide the service. So I think we want to bring new young talent into the fold, and I think we have to think openly about how we might do that.
So when you help me moderating, would you like to invite some fresh blood, new people, ask them? Wouldn't that be
Definitely.
a good conclusion from that conversation?
Absolutely. Fantastic idea.
Yeah. Okay. So Manmeet, thank you very much. Thank you very
you.
much for supporting Endoscopy Essentials and helping me in moderating. I'm really looking forward to season 2.
My pleasure. Thanks, Thomas.